Good evening, everyone, or depending on where you're tuning in from, good afternoon. My name is Natalie Abel. I'm a program manager at iNACOL, and I'd like to welcome you to iNACOL's November Teacher Talk webinar. There will likely be a few more folks trickling in here today, but I will be helping to moderate tonight's webinar, and before we get started, I would just like to go over a few housekeeping items with you. So, in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a chat box. Please introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, where you're tuning in from, what you'd like to learn today, or if you have any questions. And also be sure to ask questions throughout the webinar as well. We'll save about 10 minutes or so at the end for Q&A. So ask your questions there, and we'll be sure to get those answered for you. Also, if you are a member of the Twitterverse, we encourage you to share what you're learning on Twitter using #PBL, and you can also tag our handle, which is right there for you on the slide. And one last item, today's webinar will be recorded and archived on the inacol.org website, so you'll be able to watch this entire recording again, or you can just download the slides as well. So we'll send you a follow-up email with those links within a few days. So with that, I won't take up any more of your time, and I will now turn it over to Michael to kick us off today. So Michael, it's all you.
Thank you, Natalie, and greetings from Kent Meridian High School in Kent, Washington. We're about a half hour south of Seattle. I'm happy to be here with Wade Behringer, the extraordinary school leader here, and Renee Poitras, an amazing biology teacher. And together, we're going to share some information about our work on personalized project-based learning today. The agenda, as you can see, is to understand the design principles behind world-class PBL and also to connect those practices to transformative learning experiences. We're sharing here our contact information. It always seems that we run out of time at the end and everyone runs off and they say, I wish I had gotten that. So here it is for you. I won't read it aloud. You're all good scribes and you can jot it down for yourself. Okay, let me give you a bit of background about EduCurious if you're not familiar with us. We're working with teachers and school leaders across the country to help them create vibrant learning communities in their classrooms and schools. We offer an array of blended problem and project-based curriculum, a variety of professional development services and supports associated with both courses and helping teachers to design and develop their own projects, and also a national network of volunteer working professionals who serve experts as experts and mentors to students. All of this in service of empowering and motivating young people to achieve academic, career, and personal success. And that's what we think is so important. So to provide some more research on our approach, we want to share the EduCurious learning design principles. And you can see them here. There are 10 of them. And each one has a deep body of research on how, why, and where people learn from learning science behind it. So you can go to our website, educurious.org, and click on the Our Work tab and scroll down to Research. And there you'll find more information about each of these design principles. We're just going to spend a minute today on each one, and I think you'll understand as we go through there's plenty more time that could be spent describing each of them. The first and most important one is positioning students at the center of the work as developing experts on a trajectory towards mastery. Enough said. The second one, and this is really where problem and project-based learning comes in, is to be able to provide extended learning opportunities to the students. So with that in mind, what we do know is naming these principles is, and PBL is the approach, is the right approach, but it's not adequate because you really do need the other 8 design principles in your curriculum and in your instructional approach, because only with all of those, all 10, do you actually transform the learning experience for young people. And so let me just spend a second on each of them. The third one is really giving students multiple opportunities to develop ideas and the skills and practices over time with increasing sophistication. Number 4 is providing students with targeted, meaningful feedback and opportunities to reflect on their own learning. Number 5 is enabling content experts in a variety of fields to give feedback to students and also to share what they do in their job, their own career and educational trajectories, and how they got to where they are through hard work and through perseverance. Number 6 is really creating experiences for students to learn contemporary knowledge, skills, and practices. This is about what's going on in the world around them and making the work authentic. And by ensuring that the learning experiences are aligned with content standards, with college readiness standards, 21st century skills, and social emotional skills, then we know we're really preparing students for tomorrow's careers. Number 7, learning takes place in and out of school. We all know that. So we can't just focus on school alone, but we have to connect their in and out of school experiences and interests and identities and bring them together in meaningful ways. Number 8 is recognizing that learning is a social phenomenon. Number 9, leveraging and giving students access to digital literacies, digital tools, etc., gives them the tools to learn beyond a traditional textbook and help them to become not only digitally literate, but understand what technologies will be key to their success in the future. And finally, number 10, we want to make sure there are multiple means of expression to ensure that all learners gain practice presenting their ideas and showcasing their competencies over time. So if you look at the next slide, you'll see that we want to dive into that second learning design principles, extended learning opportunities for students to engage in project and problem-based learning a little bit more. Because as you can see here, the Rigorous PBL has 4 pillars: purposeful and authentic project experiences, driven by rigorous content, enhanced by meaningful and supportive interactions, and then implemented using evidence-based practices. Under each of these pillars, you can see another set of research-based practices. And we won't spend too much time today going into them, but I want to highlight a few because it's only through the pillars 3 and 4, enhanced experiences and supportive interactions and the informed practice, that we actually get to personalization. And that's part of the conversation today. Not only PBL, but personalization through PBL. So let me just dive into a couple of the pillars here. So one is at the bottom, towards the bottom of the first column, challenging, driving questions or problems. Everything in our work starts with a need to know. How is it infectious diseases outsmart us, and what can we do about it? What does it mean to me to be an American? How do I get my opinion heard on matters I care about? How green is my school? And then below that, you can see that the meaningful products allow the students to answer those questions. They can develop a video game demonstrating the transmission of AIDS virus. They can film a public service announcement or make a documentary about being an American. They can build a podcast to share their controversial issue and their findings, or even present their environmental audit to community members. It's really important that that's real world, and as you think about the rigorous content in the next column, starting and just highlighting the top point, is really driving everything backwards from significant learning goals and standards, and that's really key. We talked a little bit about that before. In the third column, I really want to encourage you to look at the notes about student voice and choice and giving student agency. One of the things we found through our work over time is by giving motivation and engagement, that gets students to be much more involved, but only when they take agency and ownership for their learning does the work go to the next level. And being able to give them that chance and to build on their voice, their strengths, their diversity within the community. And then the last column, I just want to highlight the multiple opportunities to demonstrate and revise knowledge. We're all on the trajectory towards mastery, and it's a continuous process for many of us throughout our lifetime. So why should we think that one time, with one assignment and one report, that young people will solve all that instantly in 9th grade? So let's turn now to dive a little bit more deeply into this idea of personalized learning. So What you see here is the definition from INACOL of personalized learning. INACOL defines personalization as tailoring learning for each student's strengths, needs, and interests, including enabling student voice and choice in what, how, when, and where they learn, to provide flexibility and supports to ensure mastery of the highest standards possible. They go further to say that the shift towards personalization changes the dynamic between the teacher and the student. Educators take on new roles as mentors, coaches, and facilitators, and power and control shifts to the students. By giving students ownership over their learning and grounding their learning in their interests and passions, they feel valued, motivated, and in control. We totally agree with this. Personalization is so much more than adaptive software to fill skill gaps. It's really, at its simplest form, knowing each student well, knowing that we can support them to take on issues they care about and master those need-to-know questions on their own. And the opportunity to combine technology and PBL creates a great opportunity for all of us to address the learning needs and goals of all the young people who come through our doors as a way to provide really authentic learning experiences and rigorous attention to standards and to skills for the 21st century. We believe that project-based learning includes all those design principles, and when it does, then we can answer the question, what do students need to be able to do to be successful beyond high school? Not just what do they need to graduate, but what do they need to be successful beyond high school? And we're really pleased that Wade and Renee are here to talk about how they're making that land on the ground. It's easy enough to talk about this in an academic way. It's easy enough to say, I'm going to go on a path to personalization or student agency or transform learning experiences. But we know it's pretty hard to pull it off. So essential to that work is a school leader who has a vision and goals that are achievable in a professional learning community and the right culture in the school and the right support for teachers. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Wade. Could you tell us a little bit about what's going on here in Kent Meridian and your goals for the school?
Sure. Just to provide a little context about Kent Meridian. Kent Meridian is the most diverse high school in the state of Washington. We serve just under 2,000 students, grades 9 through 12. Students that attend KM are a little over 80% students of color, right around 70% students on a free and reduced lunch, with about a 40% mobility rate. We serve the largest ELL and special ed population in the Puget Sound in one school, one comprehensive high school. Roughly 40% of our entire student body is either currently ELL or has been an ELL student at some time in their educational career. So there are a lot of challenges for our students and our staff as we embrace all types of learners at Kent Meridian. And of course, our goals are very large and demanding of our staff and our students and our community. And that's why it's critical that we work together as a team. We know that the students that are coming to KM, majority of them have struggled in their academics over the years, and many of them may be first-generation high school graduates. And so we've got a lot of creative ways to make sure that we are allowing for opportunities for kids to embrace their learning that will hopefully engage them and help them to be successful and to allow them to see that hope in their future. So of course graduation rates critical, but to get to graduation we've got to make sure that we are creating opportunities within our school and our staff to provide rigorous learning opportunities that students can buy into, that teachers can buy into, that kids see as important and engaging, so then they own their learning. PBL is critical to that work. A lot of students, again, at KM are not the kind of students that will sit down and be able to focus for 55-minute periods, 6 periods a day for their 4 years of high school. They need something else. They need something to engage and to spark a fire and to get them excited about learning, and PBL does that. And especially in our biology courses, and Renee will speak to that in a little bit, but it's really allowed our kids to embrace learning about biology through a lot of practical application and hands-on experiences that they might not be able to experience in other classes if it's if a particular text is used as the curriculum. So that's a big piece for us at KM. We really work to build relationships between the students and the kids. I mean, the students and the staff. And PBL allows that because PBL pushes the idea of a student-centered learning environment, and so it allows teachers to give students some material, kids to be able to then engage in that material and interact with each other as well as the teacher, as well as experts. And that relationship then, that trusting relationship of giving students their ownership in learning really goes a long way as far as students being successful in those classes. And we found that to be the case in the last couple of years as we've embraced PBL at KM. The other piece is making sure that as a building leader, my job is to really create opportunities for my staff and students to be the best they can be. Whether it be providing resources, professional development, and on above all, trusting that my staff know what's best for our kids. So I don't try to involve myself and get in and dabble in what they're doing so much as to try to direct and dictate what they're going to do. When my staff really know our kids, they know what's best for them, they know the best practices around PBL, and so it's the trusting environment that we create at KM, not only amongst our staff but our students, so we can embrace learning at its highest level. We function at KM really in a growth mindset for all, not just staff but students, in the belief that they have a lot of opportunities ahead of them, and that to keep an open mind and to believe in themselves and to use failure as a growth opportunity, both at the adult level and the student level. And our staff do a great job pushing our students and continuing to open more doors of opportunity for them to prove to themselves that they are knowledgeable and worthy, and that they can be successful in all content areas. And so those are the big pieces. We take a lot of risks at KM. We kind of go against the grain. We do different things to meet the needs of our kids because we don't serve a population that can function well with status quo. We've got to see what the needs of our kids are and our staff and make sure that they have access to that next edge, that cutting edge material, whether it be problem-based learning, whether it be some other type of program that allows our staff and students to really kind of go beyond that box, that traditional educational system that we function in, and allow them to bridge that and step outside and really give kids an opportunity to grow in areas that maybe they didn't know they had. So that's in a nutshell, Kent Meridian High School and our goals and how we function as a team, as a staff, as a family. And I'm going to turn it over to Renee, and she can share what's going on in the classroom.
So on the slide you see some images of one of my periods. It's a pretty standard period here at KM. I picked these pictures because it's a standard lab. If any of you teach science, you have to teach cells, and you have to be able to compare the animal and plant cell. And you look at each, and kids are answering questions. PBL takes it a step further. So the students are given a challenge, and if you notice the first picture, they actually have to plan. They're setting out the plan. What you don't see, because I'm bad at taking pictures, is there is another student that's a scribe who is taking notes on a computer. Once they have a plan, they're going to go collect their data, which we're doing in the lower picture, and then they have to go back and reflect, and then they go back and collect more data, and then they go back and more reflect. It may sound simple, but if you notice, the students have to have a real high level of communication and trust of each other to perform the task. If that communication breaks down, they won't get the task done. So it just allows, PBL allows the students to not only give the content more, but also develop the important communication skills they're going to need in their future.
So as we talk about supporting teachers, we've created a model which we call adopt, adapt, and innovate. In essence, it's very hard for a teacher to take on all of the shifts required of rigorous personalized PBL on their own from a standing start. So we know that they can leverage and utilize exemplar projects or exemplar curriculum first and learn to shift their practice in a community of learners and where they can eventually take on that work themselves, adapt it to their local context, to their students' needs, to what's authentic and relevant in their community, and then, as they come down that learning curve and feel comfortable, eventually innovate. We think about that as part of the learning community, about making sure that you've taken your best lessons, you've recognized your needs for students, you've accommodated the context and given students that agency and ownership again, as we were talking about before, bringing their interests and identities into the classroom. So Renee, maybe you could talk a little bit about your process through adopt, adapt, and innovate.
Sure. So last year we adopted EduCurious platform. It's a real-world platform in science and history. You have the history one and an English language one. Math. So we did the biology. Yeah, we did the biology one. And as we're going through it, we noticed a couple of the units could be changed in problem-based learning. So we addressed it with EduCurious, and they actually did a training for us over the summer, which allowed 5 of our biology staff to sit down and turn all the units to problem-based learning, and for us to start thinking about assessments and experts we needed. We then approached EduCurious and said, hey, these are the experts we need to go in, and they found experts for us. So we have just actually finished our first PBL of the year, and we thought we had it great. You know, we adapted it, we thought it was very innovative, we changed our things, but surprises will pop up. And that's the number one thing you have to realize with problem-based learning, is that you are not in control, the students are. So our problem was design a field study addressing an environmental issue around Kent Meridian that the city of Kent could implement. So we had all thought of different environmental issues around here: pollution, washing cars, recycling, invasive species. We had resources set up. We had experts set up, and our students were talking back and forth with the experts, getting advice on their variables. But students are students, and they think a little different than us. We had 3 teams that actually came up with social science questions. For instance, how does the amount of time spent in green space affect test scores, state test scores? And they wanted to take a group of children, have some that spend an hour each day outside and some that didn't, and then look at their test scores, which we had no resources for. None of us thought like that, right? Students think differently. So then I had to go and find some resources and experts, and the experts that EduCurious provided was able to help us. But that's, again, it's student-driven. Students are coming up with the solutions, and let me tell you, you're not going to think of all of them, which is the fun of problem-based learning, is that they come up with the most amazing and creative ideas as you're going through it. But it doesn't finish when the students are done. Last week, we actually sat down as a department, and we're very lucky here at KM. Wade, our principal, allows us about every other week time to sit down with our department and chat. And we actually had to go through and analyze how it went and then changes to make next year. So it's very useful, but as a teacher, I found some great things, which I'll talk about later. But the number one thing we found out again is that we're not in control, the students are, and you have to learn to let go, which is an important part of growth in your teaching.
Yeah, one of the things that you talked about before, Wade, was this notion of growth mindset.
Yes.
And one of the things we found with young people is they think every adult was born doing exactly what they do, and that they never had a life before and won't have a life after that class. And so as they interact with these working professionals that we bring in, whether they be content experts in the discipline, whether they be virtual mentors and exposing them to different career options, whether they be somebody who's aspirational to them based on their ethnicity or their economic background, and someone who's accomplished something, hearing their trajectory and then being exposed to what it took to get there and why school mattered, shifted that mindset for many of the young people we've worked with. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you manage that within the school.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is we've got to, as high school leaders and teachers, we've got to put hope out in front of our kids, because not all kids believe that they can be the next rocket scientist or the next lawyer or the next mathematician. And so I think a lot of what we are charged with is to create opportunities, not just academically, but socially and emotionally, where kids buy into the fact that they can be successful. So the nice thing about PBL is that it's empowerment of student learning. So kids take the ownership because they're doing the work, and the pictures and the explanation that Renee gave, it's kids are doing the work. The teacher's not leading that instruction. It's the kids doing that work, and for them to experience success and do things that maybe they have not had opportunities to do before, and then see that end product is extremely valuable. And then, of course, the appreciation and the acknowledgement from the teacher to be able to say, hey, nice work, this is your outcome, present it to the class or whatnot, is extremely valuable. The same thing on the staff side. As a leader, creating opportunities for staff to be empowered and to be able to be the voice, that then carries over into the classroom with that idea that we need to begin to hand more and more opportunities over to our students and to our teachers. I, as a building principal, cannot make all the decisions for what we do as a school. I need to have that voice and that participation from those teachers that are making it happen in the classroom. They know as well, if not better than I do, exactly what our kids need in those four walls of their room, and then they create the learning environment through PBL that then allows the kids to learn in the four walls of the room, but outside of that, in a much larger perspective, and having experts, either via phone or technology or in person in the classroom, come in and listen to students and talk to them and give them feedback and input, and also accolades to the students from the professionals and the experts saying, hey, that's great, I might use that in my own business now, or that's an excellent idea, I hadn't thought about that, or nice work on your completion of this particular project. That's exactly what it's like in the real world. And so it's just constantly feeding kids and adults opportunities for them to realize that they have the ability to be successful, and being open-minded to creating those opportunities more often than not for growth for the kids and for staff.
Renee, one of the things you talked about was the social science
Yes.
aspect that the young your young folk decided to take on, and trying to figure that out.
Yes.
One of the things that absolutely is celebrated in project-based learning is that it's interdisciplinary, that it's cross-curricular, and yet you're a biology teacher. So tell us a little bit, tell the folks listening to the webinar, how do you grapple with that? Because we often think about teachers as activators of learning. That they don't, and facilitator and guide, I know a lot of people use those phrases. We think that's too passive. Mm-hmm. You're much more proactive as an activator, and yet you can't possibly know all of the social sciences and the sciences. You're not an English language arts expert in the writing, although you might be. So how do you balance that workload and those trade-offs?
I think the key is to be receptive. So once I realized students were going in a different direction, I had to think of how I could help them. I actually brought in one of our council members of our city to come in and address local leadership and to talk a bit about social issues found in our area, because I'm not an expert. So it's up to me to find that, to be reflective, look at where you need help, and not be afraid to ask for help. So I just went to a city council member and asked if anyone could come address our students, and one of them came up and spoke to them. I also asked the experts. Educators, we use a program called Chronos, and I just put in a discussion, hey, I have a couple teams that are going more towards social science. Could any of you help me? Because I'm reflective and I don't mind asking for help. They shot back a couple ideas to me that I was able to share those resources with our students. And then I just went and spoke to the other teachers in our building. They're the experts in the social sciences, in writing. and they were able to provide some resources for me as well. So I think the key when you're doing problem-based learning is to be reflective and not to be afraid to ask for help. Because again, the students are going to guide it in ways that you've never imagined, and that's the best part of it, and just to be open to the experience.
One of the things that we think about when we think about the working professionals is how do we coordinate schedules and things. So we've come up with a few different ways experts can get involved. Sometimes it's through a video that's pre-recorded and can take you on a virtual field trip to a workplace or to offer a challenge. Another is to come live into the classroom through Skype. Certainly, as you were describing it before, going on to the platform and using the discussion board or interacting. We also know giving direct feedback to individual teams or students is really powerful, and putting that in a context. And what we hadn't originally thought of is expert as advisor to teachers. And so you've highlighted that. How do you think other teachers can think about that work? Because obviously one of the things that EduCurious does is we source that. We spend a lot of time recruiting and doing background checks on those working professionals. But if you're not working with us, or you're trying to recruit experts to work in your classroom, how would you think about taking that work on?
Go local. The person that introduced my design of field study was from our city of Kent, and she runs the park program. I just called up and said, hey, could someone in the city, and just use your resources, and she was more than willing to come up and introduce the problem to the students. Again, so then I had the council member come up. Every community is going to have experts within it. You just need to spend the time to find them. So I'd first go local. My second advice is to email and contact the local or closest community college or universities. There's a ton of professors and, to be frank, students that would love to mentor and work with high school students. And also, to be frank, my high school students really enjoy working with the college students. They're closer in age, they trust them a bit more, and the college students enjoy being a mentor towards the high school students. So that's another key. I'd say, again, looking local and then hitting up the universities and colleges in your area. Yeah,
and near peers are a key element of that. We talked just a little bit about personalization. And personalization, it's almost like considered the holy grail. And then it's also the reason so many people don't take this work on, because they said, how can I possibly do it? In our work, we found that the only way to do it is using technology. There was no way we could have every core text written at 3 different reading levels with audio files and vocabulary widgets without technology, and having young people read the same core content together. Certainly the access to a virtual mentor or a working professional who's just at their job and can come in. But as you think about personalization and the diverse demographics you provided up front, Wade, and the context in which the school sits, how do you think about taking that personalization and implementing it in an effective way? I know it's a big question. It's hard, and yet recognizing the differences, one of the things we're finding in our country is there are lots of differences, and a lot of them are highlighted these days, and with the election, et cetera. So how do we celebrate that, and how do we support that?
I mean, I think that's how you get ownership, not only from the teacher, but from the students. When teachers have the freedom to get creative with their PBL and how they deliver that, and what types of things the kids will be engaged in, they have ownership. Then they get excited because they want the kids to get excited as they are excited. And so how do you modify and adjust so kids in the classroom feel like they can take ownership in it? How do you know your kids well enough to be able to make some slight adjustments here and there so kids can truly appreciate and engage the work at the high level that you want them to engage in, so they can own that learning, so they can get excited about it, so they will dig deeper than maybe they have on other assignments or tasks. That's the big piece. One of the things I spoke to earlier, or I thought I was going to speak to, was relationships. It's critical when you work with a high diverse population, high poverty population, transient population, students that come from all over the world. speak 70 different languages, that you try to find a way to relate to kids. And a great way to do that is through problem-based learning, where kids can take ownership and make it fit an interest of theirs, something that pertains to them or something that they're interested in, whether it be in the future or currently. That's huge. In our particular school district, just as a side note, part of the teacher evaluation, there are several pieces within that evaluation that speak to personalizing the learning opportunities for kids, and this goes right along with that.
I just wanted to add, part of it is pride, getting the students very proud about their work. So I'd mentioned that one team, I saw a picture of it, that one child was off to the side on the computer. That's a communicator. It may sound like a boring job, but let me tell you, those communicators are proud of the notes they take. They email them off to their teammates, and they have a lot of pride. Every teammate has a very distinct role, and they find pride in that. And when you find pride in yourself, it ups your confidence, and you want to learn more. You're engaged in your learning. So PBL allows students to develop skills and develop the pride they need to be successful learners.
We've designed each of these projects to be relevant and to have the driving need-to-know question, as we talked about before, and to have the chance to revise their work and to think about it as a demonstration of knowledge over time. In what way does the authentic audience and a performance task and choice of that performance task drive your students and their learning?
That's huge. It's huge. And part of the, not problem, but things that I have to remember is I just can't give the answer. So when we were doing this last problem, some of the variables just weren't detailed enough, but I had to keep quiet, and I had the experts tell the students that. Sometimes it just helps with the expert, the real world doctors and engineers, to share with the students. So I had to step back as a teacher and allow the experts to help my students. That's difficult sometimes, but it allows the students to improve their communication skills and know the skills they need to be future learners. So the experts were key with that revision. They would go back, this last one they went back 3 times with their just a testable question hypothesis. And experts went on, helping them get the details they needed to actually create a field study. Without the experts, that revision would be difficult. Because as a teacher, I just want to give them the answer. The experts weren't giving them the answers. They were answering with questions and guiding the students to get there. And it was key. It was really key to those students' learning.
Of course, you set the experts up to do that.
Yes, I did.
So do take a little bit of credit there. I think we have another slide where you want to share some of the outcomes.
Yeah, let me get there.
That would be great, Renee.
Here we go. I just want to discuss the successes we had in problem-based learning. First, we noticed more enrollment in our higher sciences, including our ELL and special ed population. Majority of our students that did it last year are doing different chemistry classes this year, or they're taking anatomy physiology classes, and some of our older students are taking the IB classes. So we're noticing a more interest in science. Professional communication, not just for the students, but for the teachers. As I mentioned before, we had to sit down just last week and revise our entire project for next year. So to have a successful problem-based unit, you have to communicate with your peers. And that can get uncomfortable sometimes because you're pulling back and forth. We all have the same goal, though, the success of our students. So PBL does allow professional communication within the staff. We also noticed we're having less attendance issues this year within our classes. You know, of course, not every student's going to show every day. That's our goal. But we're noticing less students missing. And when they do come back to class, there's a lot of guilt. They're in their team saying, hey, I wasn't there. What did I miss? What can I do? These are the notes I took at home. So we're noticing PBL helps improve our attendance. Also, it's really connected to NGSS. For those of you that aren't science teachers, that's the new standards in science that were adopted in just a couple years ago. It's less inquiry and more engineering, which is tough for science teachers. I've never had an engineering class in my life. But problem-based learning, because of the revision, clearly fits into the engineering principles that we now have to teach, where students are going in, looking at solutions, plural, and evaluating the solutions before they step forward. We're hoping to see a trend in our state tests. It's kind of hard to say because we just started at the end of last year. So we do have the format to collect data this year to see if there's an increase in our state tests. At the end of our class, biology, they do have to take the end of course assessment. It's a biology class. It's not multiple choice. It's mainly a written, focusing on procedures, conclusions, and consequences. And then it is also needed for graduation. So we're hoping to see a trend there.
One of the things that you mentioned just there, Renee, is the learning community among your peers. And maybe you could explain a little more about that, and Wade, you could talk about, because I'm sure some teachers on the webinar are saying, well, my principal would never do that, or there's never enough time. And what you have done is you allowed them all to come to a summer institute for 5 days and then meet regularly throughout the course of the year. And I know some of them participated in our national webinars where all the teachers teaching biology across the country come and share best practices and trade off tips and secrets. So maybe you could each speak a little bit to that professional learning community.
Sure. There is 11 teachers here at KM that teach the biology course. It's huge. It's a huge department. We have, how many students?
I think there's over 1,000 that take biology.
That are taking biology. We're shifting it from a 10th grade class to a 9th grade class. So we have all the incoming 9th graders except for a handful, and then some sophomores that are taking it as well. So it's key that we communicate in such a way that we're showing growth and growth for our students' learning. So we've all been trained in EduCurious, and then 5 of us did attend a workshop this summer that we brought back to our peers, and then we shared what we learned. And this is ongoing. This is ongoing. I was sharing earlier with Michael that 3 of our teachers are exploring a new way to do labs, argumentative justification of inquiry. And they're testing that with some labs. The rest of us are not. And then we're going to compare our lab reports at the end of the units to see how they go. It might sound simple, no big deal, but that means we trust one another. We trust one another and support one another. And Wade's the one that's kind of helped set that up for us. I don't know if you want to talk about that or not.
Yeah. When we chose to, I was approached by EduCurious as an idea of it would be interested in this. And so I immediately said, well, yeah, let's bring them in and have them talk to our teachers, because I don't do anything to our teachers without our teachers. So because they're on the front lines, they're doing the work of the work. So my job is to support them and make sure they have the resources they need. So bringing EduCurious in, having them sit down with the staff, and having the staff then make the overall decision that yes, we want to partner with EduCurious and we want to move towards PBL in our biology courses. And then it was, okay, so what is my responsibility as the building leader? I need to make sure that they have the resources and the support they need. So a big part of my responsibility was funding labs. And as you get into a PBL type of teaching style, you're going to spend a lot more money on resources that students then have access to, because it is really much more of a project-based learning and hands-on environment. And you want kids to do that, so therefore you need to spend the money, which I was completely fine with, because I believed my teachers, I trusted my teachers that this is the answer. This is what we need to do. This is going to gauge our kids who have been, in and out of engagement using previous curriculum, and so we bought into that, and I made sure that they had access to that, as well as time. Time is critical. You cannot bring in new curriculum or new expectations around instruction or instructional delivery, especially with PBL, and expect that teachers are able to get that done in their own planning periods or before and after school without compensation or without creation of opportunities to meet and have that dialogue. And so we've done that and tried to be very intentional about creating those opportunities, not only within the school day, but out of the school day. Michael and Renee spoke to the Summer Institute, a week-long Summer Institute, which was critical, and it allowed my staff to be able to meet with experts through EduCurious and go through the lessons and revamp things and tweak things and adjust them all in the summer prior to the start of the school year, and then carrying that into the school year and having time then to meet as a team on a regular basis and even more frequently than I can even offer. But then also having access to the experts in EduCurious to be able to bounce things off of and have them come in whenever they need it or at a phone conference or whatnot is just critical. You can't expect this work to have an impact on kids or staff without supporting the staff with time and potentially resources, whether it be materials needed or compensation resources for time for them to be able to meet. My train of thought as the building leader here is the teachers do the work of the work. I need to put my money and my mouth and my time where the teachers need it, not where I, as the principal, need it. So I think we're in a good spot. We've got a good model going now. We've got a lot of buy-in and ownership from our teachers, and now they're getting even more creative and interested in doing some different things with the PBL work that EduCurious has provided for us. So all in all, I'm very happy and pleased, and look forward to seeing what the results look like at the end of the school year this year.
So in the last minute before we open it up to question and answer, what do you think is next? And I'll give that question to both of you. So we've made some great progress as a teacher in implementing this in your classroom. Renee, what's next? And Wade also, same question.
Well, going in and working with our team last week, we realized we got to give more power to the students even than we're doing now. We realized that we took too much time directing them, and we just have to let go and allow our students to go with their learning. So that's one step. Secondly, we are rebuilding our expert network. I'm working with EduCurious to build more of a mentorship program. So I know in December, instead of using the desktop format, we're going to be Skyping with a couple scientists to help us out. And of course, we're trying to build our students' professional communication skills around technology. How do you address a professional in an email when you're talking with them, that types of things. So that's where we're heading for our next unit.
And one of the things I've heard you speak about with me before is you were surprised at how few technology skills your young people have, right?
Yeah.
Students don't come with that.
No, it's one of my passions. I think my students should leave KM with, if not more, technical skills than students that are over in Kirkland or Microsoft. I have some very strong beliefs about that. Any student, no matter what their background is or where they live, should leave with very strong technology skills using all the Microsoft platforms. Being comfortable, my goal is for them to be comfortable with technology and flexible with technology. EduCurious and problem-based learning allows me to help my students develop those technical skills that they're going to need in their future. I don't believe what their background is should denote how their technology skills are expressed. Every person in my room and in the school, I've been very supportive, Wade's been very supportive of me with technology, should leave KM feeling comfortable and flexible with technology so they can be active learners in the future.
And just briefly, I'm going to continue to support my biology staff as well as the other 100 people on my staff, or teachers on my staff as well. But more specifically,
you're saying on this recording, your biology teachers are your favorite?
My biology teachers working with PBL, because we're asking them to push themselves outside of what most of them were taught in their teaching programs when they were at university, how to teach science now, and how to hand over the leadership and responsibility of learning to the students through inquiry and problem-based learning and project-based learning. And that's difficult to do. And so my job is to continue to support the teachers, make sure they have the resources they need, the time they need, and the access to whatever it is they need to ensure that our kids feel like they have that hope and they have that growth mindset that what they are doing is valuable and meaningful to them, and it's going to impact their future. So I just need to keep on listening to the teachers and make sure they're happy and and the kids are happy.
Yeah, and that's where we started, empowering and motivating young people. So we'll turn it back to you, Natalie, for the Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you all so very much. What a rich and powerful discussion today. My first question for you was asked a while back. We have a couple folks who might be interested in resources on PBL or project ideas you might share. So, Michael, maybe you can talk a little bit more about resources and projects from EduCurious, and perhaps Renee and Wade, you can share any other exemplars or ways that you found that you can share and learn more about PBL.
Sure. So if you go to educurious.org and click on Our Solutions, and then scroll down to project-based courses, you'll see there some of the projects and some of the courses we've developed, units and project ideas. There's a whole set that are shorter, 3-week units called Edu Projects, and those will pop up. They include one of my favorites, which is how are you going to use irrational numbers to thwart the zombie invasion in math class. That's one of my favorites. There also are summaries of each of the units in all of the courses. There's, in some cases, a Prezi that gives you an overview of what happens in the course of 4 to 6 weeks, some details about the information. And that's just a smattering of the kinds of things we're offering. We haven't posted a lot of them, so we're happy to share that. And then if folks scroll all the way down to the bottom of that page, we do have 2 free units that we've posted there. One is the United States on a path to the world of Panem, the Hunger Games, and what can you do about it? And young people will pick a topic, whether it's the environment or population or something else, and do evidence-based arguments there. The other is called Mining Personal Histories, and young people go out into the community and interview someone to determine the social and cultural influence that shaped who they are. That could be someone who's a mathematician in math class, it could be a scientist in science class, or it could be something that's cultural or social tied to your specific community. And the ultimate product there is a documentary. So those are ones that give you a bit of information about at least some of the options.
Another good resource is the Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy, IMSA. They do a lot of training, and they have a lot of educational resources on the websites. They're the school that might have started PBL a number of years ago. And they're quite successful about it, and they're very open with their material. So that would be a great place to start. They have a lot of templates and ideas and units that they're more than welcome to share with you.
And another great resource is Edutopia, which is George Lucas Education Foundation's website, entirely dedicated to PBL.
Great, thank you. And we have a couple online teachers with us today too. And Tim has asked if you have any strategies that could be used to make PBL work in an asynchronous online science class.
Sure, I think key would be scaffolding. Since you're not working one-on-one with the students, you just have to build the scaffolding within the project. So, you know, when we introduce a unit, we tend to use a KWL, and I'm there with the students, and I'm taking their notes and stuff. So I've scaffolded as an example, maybe doing sentence starters and that type of thing that they're finishing. So I think PBL would work in an online model if the scaffolds are built in.
Great, thanks. And we had 2 questions come in from Joe. So the first one, he asks, what strategies do you use to develop a classroom culture based on self-discovery, collaboration, and communication?
I think it's key to have respect for the students. If you show the students respect and are very clear with your expectations, there's no second guessing. My students know that I trust them and that I have expectations that are very high, and they arise to those expectations on a daily basis. It's rare that I have any issues within my classroom. So that's one. Two is teaching students how to respect each other. It's been an interesting year for me because the first time in, I think, 13 years I'm teaching mainly freshmen. So it's been very interesting. I've had to go back in. I actually did a direct instruction unit on growth mindset to help the kids understand the idea of growth mindset in their own attributes. I've also had to go in and teach them directly how to communicate with each other. I've done that by creating very distinct roles, and students take an online questionnaire, and it tells them what type of personality they had, and then we built roles upon that. So I would say the students knowing that I respect them and the students knowing they respect each other is key to building a classroom climate where students are encouraged to learn and to communicate and grow.
Yeah, and we found that because most of the need-to-knows are relevant and authentic, they want to know. So there's a young woman who's writing an evidence-based argument on Taxol. Her grandmother's dying of cancer, and she has to decide, do we save grandma or do we save the environment because you have to cut down new trees to create Taxol? And there's no way anybody was going to get in her way. She was going to solve this problem, and she was going to save her grandmother. And so all of a sudden, the culture of someone driven like that with others in the classroom creates a different reliance on each other and a different motivation. And so we found the motivation leads to the attendance, which leads to taking the work on, which leads to the better tests and grades, and ultimately, as we were saying before, the aspirations and change of your self-image and who you can be and what you want to be.
That's great. Thank you. And Joe's second question, he asked, I don't think this came up, do you have experience in using PBL for literacy education?
Yes, we do. We have 3 years of English language arts and humanities, middle and high school. We're building the 4th year out so we can have across the array of all high school years. And everyone, and Renee can talk to this a little bit, but every single one of our units in every subject has literacy design collaborative prompts, which are deep literacy reading and writing tasks, and they're all aligned to English language arts Common Core standards. So that she goes in and she sees what's expected of her, and all of a sudden, not only is it the next gen shifts required of the new standards, but it's all these other things and the supports that are required to make that happen. And so that actually is where we started the work, with biology and English language arts together. So there's more on that same page on the website.
Great. And we have another question from Sharon Gallagher on what strategies do you use to help students design projects that meet the course outcomes?
We designed the problems, and then the students are coming up with the projects. So during that week-long workshop this past summer, we sat down and we looked at our standards, and from there we built a problem that's real-world based on our standards. We then came up with experts we need to be successful with that problem. And then we made a list of products, not really projects, but products that the students could produce. And like I just said, students are original. They may come up with their own, but you want to kind of plan some products that they could produce. And that's how we did it. We were also very clear at the start of the problem when we introduced it, and they're tearing apart the problem and filling in a KWL chart. We have our standards posted right there. And we do standard-based grading here, so they get level 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's right clearly in front of them, the knowledge that they should be gaining throughout this problem that they're exploring.
And I can give one example that will also address that question, which is the Science Through Story unit, which is actually an English language arts unit, but they read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks as the core text. And that's a creative nonfiction text about the HeLa cells, Henrietta Lacks. And it's a braided narrative of this woman and how when she died of virulent cervical cancer, that her cells lived in the lab, and from those cells, all sorts of biotech companies became gazillionaires. So it's the bioethics of her story. It's her family's search for justice. She went into the hospital and wasn't seen again. It's all the science behind it, and it's how do you integrate that into an ongoing concern. And so all of those pieces are the core text, and then the question is pick a science topic of interest to you and present your findings to your community. Students came up with all sorts of ideas. They had public service announcements. They had online zines. There's a group of girls who came together and said, well, we have younger sisters, and if we want to explain some complex science to our younger sisters in elementary school, it's a children's picture book. And that will demonstrate to our teachers we know the concepts really well. Because you have to know everything in order to synthesize it down to a children's picture book. So they picked that not because they cared about the book, but because it would demonstrate their knowledge. And just as Renee said, we hadn't even imagined children's picture book as an outcome for an 11th grade English language arts course.
Wow, this is just fabulous. I'm astounded at the creativity. It really makes me want to go back to high school and go to your high school all over again. I don't see any other questions, and we are 1 minute over time. So I will just flip to the next slide that goes back to the contact information. If anybody wants to contact our presenters today, or feel free to contact INACOL as well. A huge thank you to our presenters. You were wonderful. It was extremely informative. We really, really appreciate your time and sharing your expertise. As a reminder, the webinar will be recorded and archived, so we'll send you all a follow-up email within the next couple days with links to all of this information. So with that, thank you all for attending. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day.